Only one thing's gonna walk you through this map.
You know I always look to you for counsel, but sermons make me sleepy, Shepherd. That's a long wait for a train don't come.
Take my love, take my land, take me where I cannot stand. I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me.
So once again, welcome back, and Namo Miraputsu. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So yes, continuing with our discussion. Had you kind of the last thing you were saying in the previous episode brought that to a conclusion, yeah? Or is there more? Because I have some things I can say now that I wanted to say now about kind of what has changed or shifted.
Well, I haven't quite finished this.
Go. Yeah, that's why I want to. Yeah, so continue with your thought. Cliffhanger. Bring it up back from the cliffhanger from last time. I love cliffhangers. I love cliffhanger episode cliffhanger.
Yeah. Okay, so in order to go from, I wanted to go back to Jodo Shinshu, but I didn't want to go back to Jodo Shinshu without first setting in place, doctrinal reasons to go back, rather than just sort of like flipping back to it. I wanted to try and follow, what was Honen's thought, what was Chantal's thought, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So I was picking out, from I wish I could remember what the book's called now, but the Shinchaku, and I can't remember what the rest of it is. That's the title of that particular book. It's something that Honen had actually written, or about how his teaching on Pure Land Buddhism fitted in with, or carried on, if you like, or branched off from the more traditional forms of Pure Land Buddhism. So I did that. It took me a few weeks to do that, but I did that. Thought, okay, right, I'm convinced. Back into Jodo Shinshu we go. And so that's the way I stayed for quite a while with the ups and downs. And I was discovering that, that there will be times where I'd be feeling really excited. Okay, yes, I've got it. I've got this Shinjin that Ep8 talks about, and then this major event, which started about 2 months ago, I would say, probably about 2 months ago now, was one of those events which I was thinking, how what's the best way to describe it? One of those volcanic eruptions in your life, which just goes straight to the core, and it's basically one of those things. Okay, we're basically saying, okay, what do you really believe? One of those sort of situations. When you're faced with, that awesome, well, finally a situation has come along where you're faced with that, you have to really look into what you truly believe and what you truly believe, lifelong. And I found that didn't quite match the Jodo Shinshu, formula. For example, I guess one example I could give would be, in Buddhism, I think it's pretty much across the board. There is, people don't, it's not God. They don't describe things as beings. They don't believe in a creator God, that type of stuff. And I realized during this period of time that it actually isn't something which I'd quite so easily believe that it was just, all of this is just some sort of dream or illusion, whatever. But I found at the core during this time, that's not exactly what I really believed. So it's things like that. And so where I'm at right now is that I have moved on from Jodo Shinshu. However, I did want to say that I don't think this is a problem with Jodo Shinshu. It's not. It's more of a problem with finally coming across a situation where place with, okay, what do I really accept? What do I really believe? And this, covers many, 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 many different levels and whatnot. And what was there for me during this period of time as well. So it took it to a whole new level, a whole new, not just,
Yeah.
not just what I described before, like the surface stuff, the more deeper stuff, the more kind of like, okay, what's really going on in this inner being of mine, blowing all of that up. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm on a somewhat different path at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, thanks for, sort of
But I
fully
just wanted to make it
explaining all
very
that
clear.
and clarifying that. Yeah, good. Yeah.
I did want to make it very, very clear though that it's not because I have a problem with Jodo Shinshu. It's just I found that it's not my fit.
It's not you, it's me.
No, I see. Yeah, definitely see what you're saying. And the thing that occurs to me is that this process of in and out of with Jodo Shinshu hitting the wall or hitting that catch and just can't get around it, or hitting those questions or the amount of questions or that doubt or the amount of doubts or that barrier or the insurmountableness of the barrier, and then leaving in frustration. It's hasn't been unique to my Jodo Shinshu path. I've kind of done the same thing with other paths, but it's a
Oh yeah.
very different thing. It's a very different thing, but there's a similarity there of doubts and questions and things not being addressed by other paths, or realizing what they are saying that is a kind of a response or well, actually, this was since Buddhism, really, since I started exploring Buddhism, that when I'd run into that in other religions or spiritual paths or philosophies I was exploring, I would realize and I would at the same time realize where they did respond, or where I felt I could hear the truth in them. I was like, I would always often be, and more over the years, be like, well, that's what Buddhism actually says, but kind of in a
Oh yeah.
better
Yeah.
way. And that's what would always kind of bring me back. But what I'm trying to say is I've had a similar process with other religions and other spiritual paths, that eventually I did give up on them, where I never really, the only one that I really never fully would give up on was Buddhism in the broader term. And now Jodo Shinshu, Pure Land Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, Shin Buddhism. That was the only one, but in the broader sense, Buddhism, I would never, whereas all the others I have sort of given up on, if you see what I mean, where I would reach that point where that sense of comfort that you were talking about in those really horrid time, very either difficult or painful or really trying times in life, or where there's loss, whatever it is, where you get to that point, okay, what do you really believe here? This is where the rubber hits the road. This is
Yes.
where it
Yes.
really, and I found all those other paths wanting. Or began to,
Well,
and then eventually did. And so I got to that point where in those times where I needed it, it definitely wasn't there. And when it was a more theistic path, I would, I got to the point where, as Malcolm Reynolds in Serenity said, that's a long wait for a train don't come, with the praying and begging God for this or that, or, trying to feel the whatever it was, whether it was a, whatever the belief system, whatever the religion, it didn't, it at the end of the day, when I reached those points,
Mm.
it wouldn't be there for me. Whereas
Right.
I could never fully say that about Buddhism, that because Buddhism doesn't promise the same things as other
No, no.
religions. It doesn't. It really doesn't. Um, you can't sort of pray in the same way or have a personal relationship
Mm.
with a deity in the same way that you can with other religious paths or other spiritual paths. Um, so I kind of, that in itself for me is a little bit, is kind of, it's not promising me something it's not going to give. Do you see what I mean? It's not,
Absolutely.
um, um, and I don't have to, I'm not looking for a deity to solve my problems,
Mm.
both external and internal. If you see what I mean, in the sense, in that theological kind of sense of other religious paths. It's a different thing. Um, and so now I'm, what kind of happened with it is one thing, now there is that thing in Jodo Shinshu that is sort of looked to or promised or presented is Shinjin. The arising
Absolutely.
of and settling of Shinjin, the bringing you to a state of non-retrogression where you're immediately born in the Pure Land as a Buddha, and then you return, immediately. All of that, and that in some sense, that's actually already happening, kind of thing. Um, the way it was presented, the way the teaching was always presented, that up to this point, at least in my perception,
Mhm.
was it's all about Shinjin, and that's the only place the benefits are going to come. That's the only place transformation is going to come. That's
Yeah.
the only, you know, it's that or nothing. And I've come to find now, in the past few years, that's not the case. Because, like yourself, I started reading the texts myself. I took the advice of, I think at some point, Kyokan kind of said, "Oh, look, I need your help here, Reverend Fukumoto. What do I do with this guy?" You know, here's he's got these questions, and but and just he recommends this to anybody. Read the three Pure Land Sutras through and through, and then read all of the collective works of Shinran through and through. And when I started doing that, very remarkable things started happening.
Mm.
My my sort of perception of things really shifted, really changed. And actually, even before that, actually, I should say, even before that point, um, when I was working with Kyokan, um, I came to start realizing that there's something I had always kind of intuitively sensed or made more sense to me than the way I perceived Jodo Shinshu was being presented, was that there's a process. It's not an all or nothing, one and done thing. There's a process going on of either the Shinjin process or the working of Amida or the working of the light, the working of the name, the working of the call, the working of the mind of Amida, the good from the past, the merit transference. That's all a process. I came so in the even before the past few years, intuitively I thought that makes more sense, but that's not what was being presented. And I had this thing where
Mm.
before the past few years, I felt like I had to put myself on that very narrow white path.
Mm.
I had to, it was all up to me. It was all I had to keep, and this is the teaching, and I've got to keep myself in that narrow thing of the teaching and the narrow, But now it's totally the opposite of that. I feel like the white path is so wide and has so much power under it that I can't get away from it.
Yeah.
I'm like the Monkey King trying to run from the Buddha's palm.
Yeah.
Literally, that's how I feel. I can't get it's, so that's a big shift that gradually happened the past few years since about, whatever it was, 2021 till now, a big shift in
Mm.
my perspective. Another shift in that perspective was that I started seeing in the teachings, even before I embarked upon the Fukumoto sequence, I started seeing in the teachings that actually, yeah, it is a process. There's things going on here that are happening before
Mm.
the arising and settling of Shinjin. It doesn't say, that it says when you encounter the teachings,
Mm.
these things will happen. Or when you exposed to the light of Amida, these things will happen. It doesn't say Shinjin at that point. Just says
No.
encountering the teaching, any encounter with the teaching, any encounter with the light, any exposure to the light of Amida, any working of Amida is going to start bringing about changes. And that's what I started to see. It's not all about Shinjin. It's not all about the Shinjin Club, although that is ultimately,
Mm.
that is ultimately the the main
Yeah.
teaching. But there's a process that happens. And I began finally, whereas previously I didn't see that,
Mm.
I began to actually see that. And as I reflected back, I could see I was kind of empowered or enabled to reflect back and see where the changes were occurring or things. I could see the working in that, all that inconceivable, indescribable, immeasurable way. I could reflect back on my life and see, yeah, things were happening, things were changing, or this happened, and I didn't even realize that was going on when I was exposed to the teaching. I was able to do things after that I didn't, and I didn't even know it. Do you see what I mean? I don't know if I'm expressing this
Oh
very
yeah.
well,
No,
but I could look back and see, not, so it wasn't just I saw it in the teachings. I could look back and reflect on my experience, and that's in my experience that there's a process going on with it. So I mean, because it's not. Do you see what I mean? It can't be just this static. Okay, suddenly Amita goes wham, and you know, you're Shinjin. You do you
well,
see what
I
I
mean,
mean? It's not. That's not
absolutely.
how
I
it
mean,
works. You know.
no, I mean, basically, it's a bit like in agriculture, or if you're into gardening or stuff like that, you don't plant a seed and immediately, boom, there's the flower. Whatever.
Yeah. Yes,
It,
exactly.
it's
It
a
gets,
process, and it's a natural process and whatnot.
yeah,
And
yeah,
with
yeah.
what's
But
been
one
going on.
quickly thing to say though,
Oh,
before
sorry.
I finish with that, is this was all especially confirmed when I
Mm.
started really going through in that
Yeah,
Fukumoto
yeah.
sequence order of reading the three Pure Land Sutras and then embarking on reading the collected works, which I'm still doing. It's going to take a while. But that especially confirmed for me there's a
Yeah,
process of Amita's working happening
absolutely. Yeah.
prior to, and you don't even, how can you say when, that, what I mean? Where it's a process. And,
Absolutely.
even in the wording of arising of Shinjin.
Mm.
So arising suggests a there's a process involved there, and then settling,
Mhm.
so, and settling, it's not just okay, it's settled. It's settled. There's a settlement, just like sediment settles, at the bottom of there's a settling of things and things have in a process of equilibrium that things come to. Do you see
Mhm.
what I mean? So
Oh, absolutely.
that
Yeah.
was all confirmed in both my experience and in the teachings.
Mm.
Um, uh, and there was one other aspect of this I wanted to kind of say as far as what has changed or shifted in my perception of. I think, oh yeah, the third thing kind of was the first thing, was I made this decision. I had this. I feel now I feel like I was enabled or empowered to make the decision that or things ripened to such a point where I was ready to, no matter what, I was going to come to a point of, I was gonna ask all the questions. I was gonna discuss all the doubts. I was gonna every single thing. I was gonna leave no stone unturned, and I have done that,
Mm.
and looked for in the teachings what that all means, like what we're meant to be doing, obviously enabled by Amida of the Dharma dialogue and what all the numerous things that could be, and the listening deeply and what all that can be, and the reflecting deeply and what all that can be. And so those were the three things that shifted my, got me past the Shinjin Club. the wall of the Shinjin Club, the barrier, whether whether that came from within me, that perception, or a not very good way that the teachings have been presented in more recent decades, let's just say. But that was these were the things I feel like I've been shifted past that somehow, like got past that barrier, and that was a big one. That was a big one, because then I didn't have to worry. Then I didn't have to worry about it. I'm in the process.
Mm.
All those things in Kyogo Shinjo, it says, you know, when you encounter, well, you've already encountered, so you're already, you're already in it. You're already in the process. You're
Yeah.
already there. So don't. So I stopped worrying about, less and less, I should say. Now, it wasn't all at once, but less and less I stopped worrying about that focus on Shinjin and just went with the flow. More and more went with the flow. If you see what I mean. So
Well, I mean,
that's yeah,
none of this stuff can be forced anyway. I mean,
yeah,
and
exactly.
sometimes I think it takes a crisis
Mm,
to,
mm,
for a moment of, is it, but everybody has, how can I put this? Everybody has sort of like this point where, or something happens where, you kind of like, you find out, where you're really at, whether it's, Shinjin in the Jodo Shinshu path or some other path. I think it's really kind of like, I mean, like I said, I'm on a somewhat different path right now. But that process you're talking about going through, and finding out that it's more than just about Shinjin. There's a process to it,
mm.
which you're happy, which you're part of and whatnot, and you still got that peace.
Yeah.
It's very much how I would describe where I'm at right now.
Mm,
It's
mhm,
and I think it's very, very difficult to have that level of honesty with yourself. I think
mhm,
sometimes it
mhm.
takes, so it doesn't have to take an absolute crisis for this to happen,
But it takes
but
what it takes.
it takes what it takes. And there's also on top of all of that, there's the karmic situation as
Yep.
well. You
Yep.
know, we've got all this stuff, from goodness knows how many hundreds of lives before, and it's come down to this particular life
Yep.
and this particular here and now. And it may be a bit jumbled and whatnot, and take you many, many years to to get to that thing that's going to satisfy that yearning, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think eventually, as long as you keep seeking and whatnot, like you're talking about in terms of Jodo Shinshu or Buddhism in general, as long as you keep seeking, you will find satisfaction to whatever it is that will meet that yearning. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I see. I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And
It,
I think that's an important aspect of this. I
yeah, yeah,
wanted to come back to that sincere seeking.
yes. It has to be sincere. It won't work if it isn't.
Any serious
Mm.
uh spiritual path requires that. It,
Yes.
otherwise it's you know it's going to be, you won't be making progress really. You won't
No,
be
no,
There
no.
won't be, you know, that transformation process. There won't be that um and it also it motivates. You
Yes.
won't be motivated to keep going. without
absolutely.
that. Whatever drives that. Obviously, now I kind of feel like it's Amita's wish that's driving me,
Absolutely.
Amita's aspiration that's driving me.
And that's
Um,
absolutely right. That's absolutely
yeah,
right. You know, I wouldn't
but
try
what
and
I'm
try and
trying to
change
say
things. Oh, okay.
is that is whatever your spiritual life, but I think especially with Jodo Shinshu,
Mm,
that you have to have that. You have to come to a
absolutely.
karmic
Yeah.
ripening of your life where that you are kind of like, okay, this, you know, this or bust. You do
Mm.
like Paul Roberts used to say, Buddha or bust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Buddhahood or bust. Or you whatever it is, you have to say, especially I think with Jodo Shinshu,
Mm,
you have to have that
mm,
deep, sincere aspiration, that deep, sincere drive for the truth. Otherwise, you won't. I can't.
exactly. Yeah.
For me, I've realized that is coming from, you know,
Mm,
Amita's good from the past, Amita's working, upaya, various things, but
yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
do you see what I mean?
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
own karmic ripening and however all that works together. But you do need that. You can't just be,
You can't engage in
yeah.
shopping mall spirituality.
Yeah, I can't, you won't,
You know what I mean?
you
You
won't
can't.
stick
Yeah.
around. Like, if you're
Yeah.
not, when you get to these points in Jodo Shinshu, like we're talking about, you
Yeah.
just be like, you know,
Mm,
just, did you know, what I mean? you,
yeah.
you won't be motivated to, to really dig in,
Hmm.
to really go deep with
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
Um, the deep reflection, the deep listening. It's called deep listening, deep reflection for a reason. You know,
Yeah. Well,
you
quite. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you have to go deep, and you have to be enabled and empowered, obviously, to go deep in order to do that.
Oh,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think, these things have, who knows how these things actually started in terms of spiritual seeking, how many lives ago that actually started, and it's kind of like probably gone along layer on layer and layer. You've sort of like gone through life after life of, the spiritual seeking and whatnot. And it's just got stronger and stronger and stronger. But I don't think it's something that's come from us. I think this comes from outside. I think there's something sort of like comes along at some point in a previous life, maybe or in this life, taps you on your shoulder and go, you know.
yeah,
Do you know what I'm getting? It's
yeah,
sort of like an intervention type thing which kicks you off. Because I don't
hmm,
think it's possible, considering the level of ignorance that we're in and whatnot. I don't think it's possible for us to have, you know, off our own bat started off this
yeah,
process. I think it's something
yeah,
that's cropped up at some point in some life, this one or some previous life, which kind of sparks it off. Do you know what I'm getting at? An intervention of some sort
yeah,
that does
yeah.
it, not something that's come. Not, I don't think it's come from us. I don't see how it could.
No, no, definitely. Yeah, I completely 100% agree. Within, perfectly within Jodo Shinshu kind of teaching,
Yeah, yeah.
completely, agree with that.
It takes a
I
lot of
think,
power intervention to get
yeah,
things started.
to get,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just,
Then that continues all the way through.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it does. It does. You raised the thought that I'm trying to come back to that, oh yeah, those periods when we hit those periods in life when we really need it.
Mm.
Um, I don't know about you, but um, when I've hit those, I never really in my adult life, this is, I never really had, other than Buddhism, other than sort of Buddhism, and maybe at one point it was kind of in the 90s, it was like Buddhism and Taoism, and so in the broader sense of that, the Taoic, you know, bringing in bringing in, the kind of what you traditionally understand as Taoism, but also Confucianism, Taoic, and also like even Shinto,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
some sense, I kind of see as kind of Taoic, in it. But and other things that would be kind of in the folk, I would say, shamanistic, East Asian shamanistic traditions and sort of folk religion. Um, that was kind of all there to some degree, I think, in the 90s, in my life. So that was like the only consistent thing, but it wasn't something I felt completely sure about. you
no.
know, then it
But
wasn't.
it was pavement along the way. It was
Yeah,
placing
it was
stones
like
along.
always the background, but it was never at that
Mm,
time anyway. Not, I shouldn't say it was never, but at that time it certainly wasn't the, something it was. I felt probably more attuned or sure about that than anything else, but I never really had a certain for most of my adult life. I didn't
yeah,
have that certainty about anything really. To be honest, to be fair, um, and so um, when things would happen, like the passing of my brother, very say he died in an automobile accident in the early 90s, and shortly thereafter my grandmother passed away, but more natural, sort of causes. Um, that did so I was exploring some other pathways and some other things, but that did seem to focus my mind more on Buddhism and Taoism and how that fit, how that experience, what I was experiencing in that pain, at that time, and all the pain and the loss and the bereavement and the confusion and the regret and the anger, particularly with my um about my brothers, because he was a drunk driver, um
mm,
that killed him. So um it out of all the things, it seemed like Buddhism and Taoism gave more answers, but it didn't necessarily give the comfort, the
mm,
same kind of comfort, I should say, that maybe the religion or similar religions that I was brought up to would offer, and that you could, pray to this personal God, or do you know what I mean? And you'd have this, relationship with God, and it didn't offer that. But but looking back again, we can reflect back, and I can see the things that it gave comfort about was it explained much better
mm.
those things in terms of karmic currents, in terms of impermanence,
Yeah,
aging, with my grandmother, you know, birth, aging, sickness, death, with my brother, all the karmic causes and conditions that led to that moment. Um, do you see what I mean? It gave more underlying comfort than a
absolutely.
direct personal comfort, if you see what I mean. Um, and I found that similar in other periods of my life,
Sure. Yeah.
um, where devastating things happened,
Hmm.
and I'd look to the more theistic paths, and
Didn't happen for
I'd
you.
go around in this
Yeah,
circle of
yeah, yeah,
help me, help me, help me. Yeah, okay, this is the things I need to do. I'm doing it. I'm not, this is not happening. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? I'm not
Oh yeah.
getting out, and I'm not being accepted by these other people that are in the same path, or in the same, and so I gave up, eventually on those.
Yeah.
That's not that
It's
simple, but it, you know,
it's
but,
very
but
much a
so
personal thing.
I think that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is somehow that was settling for me or something, that it wasn't a personal, there was kind of more peace in that than there was in this personal relationship type of approach. Do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah,
To
I
this
do.
day, I guess. Yeah. So
Yeah. I completely understand that. I mean, it's I I've had a slightly different spiritual track on that score, where I have found the idea of a personal God very real to me in a lot of ways. But again, it's like I mean, somebody may enjoy mushrooms, eating mushrooms or whatever. Somebody else absolutely hates mushrooms. Do you know what I mean?
well, I thought you were going somewhere else there for a minute.
No.
Speaking of spiritual paths.
And that's what I've not tried yet. Or Marmite, people hate Marmite, well, they like Marmite. I think I mean, the reason why you have so many varieties of spiritual experiences and stuff like that is because there's so many varieties of different people, and so it's whereas for example, in Buddhism, you've got how many 86,000 Dharma cases. There've got to be
hence the teaching about 84,000 Dharma doors.
So I mean, some people will look at Pure Land Buddhism or Jodo Shinshu especially maybe and think, oh come on, that's not really Buddhism. But this thing over here, Tendai, or some other, or the Hinayana, I can't remember what the one that's Bhikshu Bodhi is
Theravada.
Theravada, thank you. Yeah. Theravada,
it's more gentle, respectful generally. To say Theravada than Hinayana. Yeah.
Absolutely. I simply couldn't remember the word. Yeah. But where basically you completely take away the idea of a personal Buddha even. Zen isn't even based on that. You haven't even got that. But it suits that type of person that, like in the Vajrayana, the Tibetan Buddhist type things. It's within Buddhism in and of itself, you've got all these different things with different types of people and I think I'm quite like Renyo's attitude and Schumann's attitude was, look, okay, we're into Jodo Shinshu because we can't do any of these other practices, and this would be the reason why they're not. But respecting anyway all these different Buddhist practices, all these different Buddhist traditions, even to the point of saying, don't go up in front of all these Buddhist traditions and start pushing Jodo Shinshu down their throats.
Exactly. In fact, in Jodo Shinshu, it's believed that's all from Amida Buddha. That's all from the Amida Buddha as the ultimate compassion and wisdom, the beginningless Buddha, Buddha of beginningless path, Dharmakaya. That's actually the upaya of Amida, happening through all those pathways. So and Buddhism, Bodhisattvas, and even through other religions that using other religions as the upaya, for to bring people toward the gently toward the truth. But right, well, thank you. We're at the 1 minute mark here, so let's continue the discussion. Definitely, in this series, and see where it goes.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining me.
Yes.
Have a good evening, and I'll just say,
you too.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Take
care. Bye now.
The storm's getting worse.
We'll pass through it soon enough.
What was that?